Supreme Personality of Godhead as his life and soul, neglecting all external material things. Dhruva Maharaj was in this category, and due to his determination, he achieved the result he desired. But still, when he returned home, he was not very pleased. Om Nayanativadandasya Nanangada Shradakaya Takshurum Militamina Tasmai Shri Guruve Namaha Shri Chaitanya Nirudistam Staptam Nina Bhutale Swayam Rupa Padatmayam Dadati Swapadandikam Vandeham Shri Guru Shikshatam Manakamadam Shri Guru Vaishnavam Scha Shri Rupam Sahajatam Sahagana Bhagavatam Vitamtam Sajivam Savaitam Savadutam Parijana Sahita Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padam Sahagana Lalita Shri Vitam Scha He Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dinabandha Jagatpate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostate Saptakam Janagorangi Radhe Vrinda Ganeshwari Vishwadhanu Sudhadevi Pranami Hari Priya Vanchika Vatu Vyascha Kripasintu Vyavacha Viditana Bhavebhyo Vaishnavyo Namo Namaha Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Sivasadi Gaura Bhakta Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna. So let us together look at this verse more closely and try to understand why it is that Dhruva Maharaj was not pleased even though he had achieved the ultimate goal. So just a quick recap on this section of the 9th chapter. What's happened here is Dhruva Maharaj has received his reward from Lord Vishnu. First, he has finally gotten the darshan and the association of Lord Vishnu. Then he has been given his reward. Shortly after, he is able to offer his prayers of gratitude. So to understand this a little more, we can look at actually the next purport that's there in number 29. So in that purport, Srila Prabhupada describes that a pure devotee is always free from any kind of material desires. In the material world, one's material desires are almost demonic. One thinks of others as one's enemies, one thinks of revenge against one's enemies, one aspires to become the topmost leader or the topmost person in this material world, and thus competes with others. This has been described in Bhagavad Gita in the 16th chapter as asuric. A pure devotee has no demand from the Lord. His only concern is to serve the Lord sincerely and seriously. And he is not at all concerned about what will happen in the future. So in the Mukundamala Stotra, King Kulashekar, author of the book, states in his prayer, "My dear Lord, I do not want any position of certain gratification in the material world. I simply want to engage in your service perpetually." Similarly, practically every morning we chant Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's Shikshastakam, where it also has a very similar verse where it states, "My Lord, I do not want any amount of material wealth, nor do I want any number of material followers, and nor do I want any attractive wife to enjoy. The only thing I want is to be engaged in your devotional service life after life." Furthermore, it is described in this purport that Krishna is so affectionate towards his devotee, especially to that of Dhruva Maharaj, who again is only 5 years old, who went to render devotional service in the forest alone. And that even though his motive was impure, the Lord does not consider that motive and is concerned predominantly with the service. If the devotee has a particular motive, the Lord directly or indirectly knows it. And therefore he does not leave the devotee's material desires unfulfilled. The These are some of the special favors by the Lord to a devotee. So we can understand, as we keep approaching this topic again and again, that initially, what was Dhruv Maharaj motivated by? What was his desire? Revenge, exactly. He was motivated by revenge. He sought revenge. And he wanted a kingdom better than that, even of his great-grandfather, who of course is Lord Brahma. So ultimately we can understand that this revenge is coming from somewhere. This desire for revenge comes from sense gratification. It's a form of sense gratification. And that sense gratification actually stems from pride. What was that pride that Dhruv Maharaj had? It was the pride to want to prove himself as worthy, and even not just that, as better. In other words, pride in this context is connected to that of domination, the desire to dominate. So basically, Dhruv Maharaj wanted to dominate via material acquisition simply to prove his worth. That was his initial motive. At the same time, we can understand that he completely decided to renounce all of his material comforts and just immediately renounce those things and with determination go into the forest, go into the complete unknown. So we can understand that he had some faith. He had some faith that he was going to attain Vishnu no matter what.
So in the Bhagavad Gita, in chapter 15 and verse 5, Srila Prabhupada says in the purport that when one is free from the illusion of pride, he can begin the process of surrender, and that for one expecting some honor in the material world, it is not possible to surrender to the Supreme Personality. So this is interesting. Like, we're looking at, in one sense, this is what's written in the Bhagavad Gita, and that is very much the case. But here we're given the example of how by the power of devotional service, one can become purified. And actually, the thing that is most attractive to Krishna is that desire to actually attain him and to put ourselves on that path, on the direction towards him. So again, in this purport, in the next verse, verse 29 of chapter 9 and canto 4, the great sage Maitreya explained that Dhruv Maharaj did not desire in the beginning to engage in the service of the Lord, but he wanted an exalted position better than that and his great-grandfathers. This is more or less not service to the Lord, but service to what? Yes, service to the senses. Even if one gets the position of Brahma, the most exalted position in this material world, he is a conditioned soul. Srila Prabhupada Sarasvati says that if one is elevated to real, pure devotional service, he considers even great demigods like Lord Brahma and Indra to be on an equal level with an insignificant insect. The reason is that an insignificant insect has a desire for sense gratification, and even a great personality like Lord Brahma also wants to dominate this material nature. So here we can start to understand that of all of the things that one can attain, the greatest thing above all designations, above all positions, all rewards, the greatest thing is that of pure devotional service. And how do we get this pure devotional service? We're going to look into this a little more as we continue to discuss this. But it's actually by understanding what is our true position. And what is our true position in relation to the Supreme Personality of Godhead? It's knowing that we are the servant of the Supreme Personality, exactly. So sense gratification means domination over material nature. The whole competition between conditioned souls is based upon domination of this material nature. Modern scientists are proud of their knowledge because they are discovering new methods to dominate the laws of material nature. They think that this is the advancement of human civilization. The more they can dominate the material laws, the more advanced they think they are. So this is a measure, this is how we are measuring our supremacy in the world, how nowadays in modernity we think we're getting more and more better because we're finding ways to alleviate ourselves from the difficulties that are presented in the material world. We have air conditioning, we have aeroplanes, we have different modes of transport, we have different ways to communicate with other people on other sides of the world. We have Amazon, the internet, so we can attain objects from anywhere in the world. So this is, as we know, is described nothing more than actually finding ways to conquer material things. It is not actually advancement, and it is also, as we see with some spiritualists, who aim to actually conquer nothing more than material things. So we can see that the modern scientists are compared to this. Dhruva Maharaj's propensity in the beginning was just like that. He wanted to dominate this material world in a greater position than Lord Brahma. Therefore, elsewhere it is described that after the appearance of the Lord, when Dhruva Maharaj thought and compared his determination to his final reward, he realized that he wanted a few particles of broken glass, but was instead had received the reward of many beautiful diamonds. As soon as he saw the Supreme Personality of Godhead face to face, he immediately became conscious of the unimportance of his demand from the Lord to have an exalted position better than that of Lord Brahma. So, let us examine a little closer this quality of pride and how through the process of devotional service or through this process of bhakti yoga, this can actually become transformed. Transformed into, what does it get transformed into, this quality of pride? Anyone hasten to guess? It becomes transformed into humility. So how does one get there, and how can we look at this through the journey of Dhruva Maharaj? We can see that what happened first is he got the association of the pure devotee, of Narad Muni. And by following those instructions of the pure devotee and of the spiritual master who was Narad Muni, he was able to become attached and follow the process of devotional practice, of devotional activities, which then of course led to self-realization. And of course, the more that one becomes self-realized by this process of association and coupled with devotional service, devotional practices and activities, one gets to become more self-realized, and in turn this leads to humility. So once Dhruva Maharaj realizes his true position, just as Lord Brahma does in the 10th canto, when he realizes that all of his creative energies are actually coming from none other than that child, that young cowherd boy known as Krishna, when he realizes that that's actually his Supreme Lord, and not just that that's where his whole being, his whole existence, all of his energies, all of the things which he holds to be, his prowess, his prestige over the creation, that it actually is coming from none other than this, what he thinks is just this young boy, just playing with the other cowherd boys, just herding cows. When he realizes that, he becomes extraordinarily humble, and he is able to offer prayers of gratitude. So, thus by this humility, we can open up ourselves to receive the Lord's mercy. So here we can see again in this example of Dhruva Maharaj that he is given this opportunity to both fulfill his desire and perform sacrifices as a great king for none other than 36,000 years before he is then able to return to the spiritual world. Even though at this point he is already free from material desires, which happens immediately as soon as he becomes self-realized, as soon as he is given that darshan, and then as soon as he is given the touch by Lord Vishnu, he becomes then empowered to rule as the king of the universe and as the servant of the Lord. So we can understand that his mood completely changes as soon as he attains that reward, as soon as he attains that desire that he has. But at the same time, he isn't pleased. And the reason he isn't pleased is because he becomes fully realized, because he actually understands immediately what is his position, and he feels foolish, even as 5 years old, because he has this complete understanding of his position. He realizes, I was a fool to ask for anything in the first instance, because actually this thing that I've been given is far greater than anything I could have ever asked for. So how do we get to this? If we're looking at how pride can be transformed by the practice of devotional service and by the association of devotees, how can we get to this? How can we get to humility? Let's have a look first at what is the definition of humility? And let us very much understand the difference between something like humility and something even like humiliation, to be humiliated, which is obviously leading to a lack of self-esteem. This is not the same as humility. So if we just look at a dictionary definition of what humility is, it is defined that humility at its core is having a modest or low view of one's own self-importance. It involves recognizing one's strengths and weaknesses without feeling superior to others. It is not about self-depreciation or weakness, but rather a truthful self-assessment and appreciation for the worth of others. So a few points about this is it goes furthermore to say is that it's when one has an accurate self-perception. So in the context of what we're talking about here, this is becoming more and more, the more one becomes self-realized, the more that one understands one's position, the more that humility comes as a natural byproduct. Appreciation of others. So this is a way in which we can actually actively and practically apply a principle of how to actually become more aligned with this quality of humility is by doing what? Is by actively appreciating others. What are any other ways that you can think of where we can actually begin to, in our process, something that we do daily, where we can foster more of this quality of humility? Does anyone have any ideas? Yes. If you do a difficult service, even one that you're particularly not good at, that can help, yes. So by pushing ourselves out of that comfort zone, by allowing Krishna to fulfill the things that we may lack, and also allowing for the support of the devotees to be there, understanding that we are not the doer, and that we are actually just this vessel for this process to be carried out via. Allowing ourselves basically not to get in the way. So a wonderful example of this can be when we go out on book distribution. When we go out on book distribution, I think it's His Holiness Shiva Ramswami, he's actually written a whole thing about not getting in the way. And it's wonderful because it's true, isn't it, that actually the only thing that's stopping us sometimes when we've approached somebody in the street and they've said, no thank you, I don't want this today. What can happen at that point? We can get in the way of being able to immediately ask the next person, because we can let our sense of false prestige and pride get in the way of just thinking, never mind, not today, let's ask another person. And allowing this process, this process of Krishna consciousness, allowing ourselves to be that vessel, to be the instrument of our Guru Maharaj, ultimately to connect us, to be the instrument of the parampara, which leads us, of course, to none other than Krishna himself. Another way in which we can more align ourselves with this process of promoting humility in our personal practice is by simply offering our dandavats, our pranams, offering our obeisances to the other devotees. We often do this with our prayer, Vanchakalpatarubhyascha Kripasindubhyevcha, Patitanam Pavnebhyo Vaishnavyo Namo Namaha. We're constantly trying to find ways to remind ourselves to be respectful, to offer our obeisances to devotees. This is a wonderful way of greeting devotees and of understanding that let's not let our false pride get in the way of being able to do that. Let's honor that jiva, that jiva's attempt within them. Even if we are not appreciating the actions, it's not that we don't appreciate the personality and the jiva within. So we can find a way to offer our respectful obeisances no matter what. Of course, we can also serve the devotees. Serving the devotees, one of the easiest ways is to serve prasadam. I know some wonderful personalities describe that what is the easiest way to please so many devotees in a matter of moments. Jayananda knows. It is to serve prasadam. By serving prasadam to the devotees, even if we were not the ones who took the sacrifice of making, being in the heat, cooking and doing all these different activities, simply by just serving the prasadam, immediately what happens? What is one of the happiest prayers that the devotees will sing? Sararara Vidya Jal, yes. Everyone is smiling. Everyone is smiling when they're in the line for the prasadam, no matter what. So by doing this, immediately you've pleased so many devotees so fast, just in a few actions of bending the wrist and scooping out. So what is another thing that we can do? We can glorify the devotees. Again, we said just there, appreciation. Just by simply telling somebody, if you appreciate the beautiful way which Sri Sri Radha Govinda addressed, if you appreciate the garlands, if you appreciate the way someone sang today, or even something else, you appreciate that somebody polished very nice the glass of the windows so that we have a beautiful presentation for everybody coming to see us today. Different activities the devotees perform. By showing our appreciation, again, we actually cut that sense of false pride, false ego, false prestige. And we actually align ourselves more with this quality of humility. So Srila Prabhupada describes this humility in the purport of the Bhagavad Gita in chapter 13, 8, verses 8 to 12, as follows. Humility means that one should not be anxious to have the satisfaction of being honored by others. The material conception of life makes us very eager to receive that from others. But from the point of view of a man in perfect knowledge, who knows that he is not this body, anything, honor or dishonor, pertaining to this body is useless. One should not be hankering after this material deception. People are very anxious to be famous for their religion, and consequently, sometimes it is found that without understanding the principles of religion, one enters into some group which is not actually following religious principles and then wants to advertise himself as a religious mentor. So what does humility mean for us? Humility means that we're having, as Sahadev just pointed out, when we put ourselves out of that comfort zone, what are we doing? We're increasing our dependence upon Krishna. And by doing that, we're acknowledging we're not the doer, but we're also acknowledging that we are not perfect, that we have some faults. but that we have faith and we're going to go forwards anyway. That we're going to try a little harder, that we're going to make ourselves more visible and more accessible, more of a candidate to receive the mercy flowing down. Within humility, what do we get? We actually get the happiness of feeling insignificant, of understanding that we are das anu das anu das anu das, but really embracing it and feeling content and happy in that position. Feeling happiness in the feeling of being insignificant is contrary to all of the things that are promoted within material existence. So when we are happy being small, and we actually become more happy, more content with who we are, despite of our shortcomings. This can be achieved when we feel the support of others around us. This is why it is advisable, or this is one of the reasons why it is advisable to practice this process of devotional service in the association of devotees. Because then we can actually understand that we have that support network, and we can actually become more happy. We can think, yes, I can become more happy with who I really am and where we are at in our own level of Krishna consciousness. So again, humility is not about low self-esteem, and it is not achieved neither by humiliation. So it is not about, so let's look at that a little bit more. It is not about thinking, of course we read about, I'm, lower than the straw in the street, or I am the worm in the stool. Like, these are the sentiments of the great devotees, the great acharyas before us. But actually, these sentiments, these concepts, these realizations and understanding actually come as a byproduct the more that we deepen our love of God, because humility comes the more that we deepen our love of God. So by this process, we actually truthfully and honestly have these understandings of being that lower than the straw in the street. These different, like the worm in the stool. We actually gain that as a full understanding. We don't just think of it as a thing to attain. It just comes as a byproduct of this deepening of our love of God. So, Dhruv's desire was so strong, this desire initially because he became upset, which led to him becoming angry, which led to him thinking, I will prove myself and I will achieve something better than anybody here. So he then was told that the only way that he could do this was by approaching Lord Vishnu. Immediately, he renounced all comforts and entered into the forest with extreme determination. He desired to attain the darshan of Vishnu and ask him for the greater kingdom. So we understand in our process that Srila Prabhupada has given us that we cannot become free from desire, that it's not possible to become free from desire. Whereas there may be other schools of thought which base practically their whole philosophy on becoming free from desire, we understand that it's not possible to come free to desire. But the important thing is to align our desires and to understand that the process of Krishna consciousness is to understand that Krishna's desire is higher than ours, and how can we please Krishna consciousness? And that is by aligning our desires, our senses, our intentions with that of Krishna and what pleases him. And how can we understand what that is? By the association of devotees, ultimately by approaching a spiritual master. So this process of bhakti yoga and the power of devotional service leads to the purification. This is a wonderful example that we can see here, that even though Dhruva Maharaj's initial motive was not pure, by the process of devotional service and the association of the pure devotee, he became purified and ultimately was able to achieve more than what he could have ever imagined. We can understand that through self-realization, we will get humility without even trying for it. And we can all here, I'm sure, can attest that actually we are becoming more humble, that it is something that's happening via this process that we're practicing each day. Of course, there are times where we have to remind ourselves, and again, that's why it's important to be in the association of devotees who can remind us. And as well as we just mentioned there, one of the processes of humility is to be able to accept the advice from others. And through this renunciation of material desires, we in ourselves, through this process of bhakti yoga, we gain more and more faith and become completely steadfast in the process, which in turn increases our determination. So Srila Prabhupada, of course, describes that pure devotional service means to be free of all material motives. So this is how we can understand that in just a moment, as Srila Prabhupada describes, like how can we become Krishna conscious? How can we attain pure devotional service? How long does it take? And Srila Prabhupada says, in just a moment it can happen, just 1 second. Because this is what's happening here to Dhruva Maharaj. In just a moment, even though he's done all of these austerities, he's gained the attention. You know, the whole world is coming to a halt because no one can even breathe, because Dhruva Maharaj, his potency has become so strong, his determination is so strong. The demigods have sought for Lord Vishnu to come in and intervene. As soon as he gets that attainment, in order to get that attainment, he actually has to reached the level of none other than a Paramahamsa. So immediately he becomes free from all material desire. As soon as he attains that vision, that achievement, all material desires are gone from him, which is why, even though he is granted his initial material desire, because that was in his heart and it was understood by Paramatma, he is remorseful for it because he realizes the greatness of what he's achieved. He fully understands his position. So this is such a beautiful example for us to feel within ourselves and to use as an inspiration, knowing that we have imperfections, but that we are on this path. We're on the right path. And no matter what, no matter how many obstacles or how long it may take us, that we are going to get there. And that how are we going to get there? We can use this as inspiration. We're going to get there because we are determined to get there. And that by the support of the devotee association and by the mercy that's coming, by being able to have this access to devotional service, we will be able to get there. Because we can see, even in this example, we don't need to be concerned about not having the qualifications in the first instance, or how to attain the qualifications, or not understanding humility when we know that that's something that we need the very most. We can understand that simply by engaging in this process, we can attain these things as byproducts. Okay, so there's 5 more minutes left, and we'll open this up for any questions or comments. Yes, Sahadev. So I think it was from where Srila Prabhupada describes humility. So this is from the 13th chapter, verses 8 to 12. So again, this is just for context. This is basically, it starts off with humility means that one cannot be anxious to have the satisfaction of being honored by others. And that actually this material conception of life makes us very eager to receive. Like, everybody wants some kind of validation. It's like, even in social media has picked up on this. Like, if you think of it from this context, social media knows this. And what happens, there have been studies to understand that the more attention we receive on social media, the more likes, the more positivity we receive, that it sets something off in our brain. It actually sets off some kind of chemical reaction. So we can understand that this can become addictive, isn't it? They've understood this is addictive somehow. At the same time, turning it around, it's perfectly good to understand that we can become more humble ourselves by appreciating others. Because when we do, sometimes you can think, oh, I don't need to tell them that it was good. I'm sure they know it was good. I'm sure many other people said it was good. But you know what? They probably didn't. And just by overcoming that idea that, oh, it doesn't matter, it's not relevant for me to say that it was good for somebody else, that I should appreciate that this person did, could even be a small thing. Sometimes just appreciating the small things of others is very significant and can inspire. You know, when you hear the pastimes, the memories of the different disciples of Srila Prabhupada, you know, there are around roughly 5,000 initiated disciples. Of course, that means that some of them got a lot of association with Srila Prabhupada, but many of them only got just a moment, just a glance, just a comment. And it can be that just one comment inspired a devotee to carry out a magnificent service. I think there's one devotee that visits here quite often. His name is Sachinarayan Prabhu. He is now heading up the Arabic book, the BBT of Far East and Middle East. And he has told, he tells, and he's even told me himself personally, that Srila Prabhupada actually told him that, I think it must have been in a room with others, that those who actually preach in the Middle East, that this is one of those that we should offer the dust of, that he offers the dust of his feet, I believe it's like something like this, to those who do that, and that they will, Kanagopal knows it precisely. That Srila Prabhupada stated that he would put the dust of whoever is preaching in the Middle East on his head. Whoa, that's like so this is extraordinary. But it's like these words of inspiration, of appreciation, of encouragement to devotees, they can encourage devotees to do extraordinary things, to build whole lifetimes of service, actually. Even devotees can be touched through just having that interaction with a devotee in the street, having a positive interaction with somebody. We don't know what's been going on in the life of that person, but having that moment of association of devotees can completely change one's life. So never underestimate the potency of glorifying the devotees. Of course, we do that every morning. Every morning, we're actually glorifying the spiritual masters, offering those prayers of gratitude, starting off our day in that mood. And one day, doing these activities All of us at different times, at different levels, more and more we're getting purified. One day it becomes realized, fully realized by this process. Are there any other comments, questions? Śrimad Bhāgavatam ki, Srila Prabhupada ki. Hare Krishna.